What defines a person? Achievement, pain, belonging, belief? This season, we explore the formation of four counterfeit identities and peel back the layers shaping who they become. Most people think identity is something we consciously choose. But as you'll see in the case of David Okoro, identity began forming long before he understood what identity even was. It started as a survival mechanism. And to understand the life David built, we have to go back to the moment that foundation was first poured. This is a case study in psychological counterfeit identity formation. David Okoro grew up in Atlanta in a close-knit Nigerian American family. His childhood was joyful, energetic, and deeply connected to family, church, and community. Weekends were filled with cookouts, soccer games, church gatherings, and long evenings surrounded by relatives and family friends. David was active, social, and constantly moving, the kind of child who seemed full of life. But at 11 years old, everything changed. David was diagnosed with leukemia. Almost overnight, the rhythm of his life disappeared. School was replaced by hospital visits, treatments, medications, and long stretches of isolation. The routines that once defined childhood gave way to uncertainty, exhaustion, and fear. Family members tried to stay hopeful. Church members prayed constantly for him. Doctors and nurses encouraged him through every stage of treatment. And during those years, David kept hearing the same words repeated over and over again: strong, brave, a fighter. The encouragement was genuine. It came from love. But over time, those words began shaping how David understood himself. People no longer just saw David, they saw the boy who survived cancer. His illness slowly became the central story of his life. And by the time he recovered, David had internalized a powerful narrative: I am the one who survived. What we are seeing with David is the formation of a psychological counterfeit identity. It operates on the belief, I am my story and my integration. Now, insight into who we are is not the problem. Psychological insight can help explain pain, reduce confusion, help us cope with trauma, and validate what someone has actually lived through. But that's part of the appeal. When people begin understanding their patterns, their wounds, and their behaviors, it creates a sense of clarity, and that clarity can feel foundational. But here's the structural problem. Psychology can explain how identity forms, but it cannot establish who has the authority to define it. Think of it like this: a therapist may understand the wiring inside of a house. They can trace the circuits, explain where the damage formed, and identify why the lights keep flickering. But they didn't build the house and they don't own the electrical grid. Psychology can explain formation, but explanation is not the same as origin. The counterfeit enters when explanation replaces origin, when the integration of someone's story becomes the foundation of identity itself. David is not simply the boy who survived, he is a human being created by God. God holds the origin, authority, worth, nature, and calling for David. But at this stage in David's life, survival has quietly become the foundation through which he understands himself. And survival was never meant to carry the weight of identity. As David entered high school and later adulthood, the story followed him everywhere. Teachers introduced him as an inspiration. Church members shared his testimony. Friends admired his resilience. And although David appreciated the love and encouragement, something deeper was happening underneath it all. The identity formed during those years was manifesting in greater ways. He became increasingly uncomfortable with weakness, uncomfortable needing help, uncomfortable appearing emotionally vulnerable. Without realizing it, survival had become more than part of his story. It had become the foundation of how he understood himself. David was no longer simply someone who survived cancer. He had begun building identity around being the survivor. There's a high price to pay for becoming the one who survived, because when survival becomes identity, peace becomes difficult to trust, rest becomes difficult to maintain, and life begins to feel like something you must constantly prepare yourself to endure. Next time, we'll look at David's being level and the internal world formed when life is built around survival. Recognition is the first step toward a true foundation because every life is flowing from something. The question is, what is your source? I'm Ann Bernard, and this is Awakening to the Counterfeit.